Very good.
Endocrine.
Endocrine, yes.
Circulatory system.
Circulatory, cardiovascular, and respiratory system. Well done. So if we do a quick recap in terms of, when we started this particular unit, aspects of human physiology, what we have done so far in this unit is we have looked at the key terminology in terms of what is the cellular organization and how do we see structures, being organized in the body. So we start with atom, molecule, organelle. We go into various structures like cell, tissue, organ system, and then finally a number of organ systems make the organism. And in this unit, the focus is to study 6 different systems. So we've studied nervous system, we've studied digestive system, we've studied the cardiovascular system, we've studied respiratory system, we've studied excretory system, and then we've also studied endocrine system. So we've gone and studied 7 in total. And there are some videos and handouts which are associated with understanding some of them in a detailed format by reading through each of these systems and the organs which make up these systems. Now, after the understanding of these 7 systems that we have done, what we want to do is get into understanding what are the various structures of, when we say what are the various levels of organization that we get to see primarily when we talk about, how systems, or say how organs and organ systems and organisms, are made. Now, in the initial bit, when we started this discussion on the unit, we looked at 7 different types of, let's say, structural organizations. So we discussed what is an atom. So atom is the smallest form of matter that we can see, and it is the most basic level of organization that we will see when we break down any sort of, chemical component or, system into its simplest form. So the idea here is the first assessment criteria wants us to explain what are the different levels of organization that we get to see in atoms. So when we talk about atoms, we are basically looking at atoms as the smallest unit of matter that cannot be broken down further. So when we talk about, your blood cells are made up of different types of atoms. So blood cells could be, if we look at human blood and we talk about blood cells, we talk about red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and, lymphocytes or, Cedar cells. So when we talk about these, the smallest form of matter which forms, helps form matter essentially would be atoms. Now, if atoms are combined, they can then form molecules. And an example I'd given here was when we talk about carbon and we talk about carbon dioxide, we talk about hydrogen and we talk about hydrogen or we talk about water. When we talk about methane, we talk about carbon and hydrogen combined. So CH3 is the formula. So when atoms combine, they make up molecules. So 2 or more atoms, when we combine, they will make up molecules. And these molecules will form the building blocks of life. So things like proteins, amino acids, we talk about lipids, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids. So an example of atom here would be carbon, or for example, in this case, we talk about oxygen. This is one type of atom. Now, if I may mix carbon dioxide, so if I put it this way, if I mix 1 part carbon, 1 part, are you able to see? Is it visible? 1 part carbon. If I look at 1 part carbon and 2 parts of oxygen, when I say 2 parts means 2 more atoms. So oxygen. So basically that means C and OO. So if I write this now, it'll become CO2, which is carbon dioxide. So these 2 atoms, carbon and oxygen, combine together to form carbon dioxide, and this becomes a molecule. When I talk about 2 parts hydrogen, so HYDROGEN, hydrogen, and 1 part oxygen, then this becomes H2O, which becomes water. and this becomes a molecule. Because what are molecules? Molecules are essentially, two or more atoms bounded or combined together. And when atoms form molecule, they will essentially, look at the aspect of making building blocks for organs, and obviously looking at, proteins or amino acids, which leads to what are called the building blocks of life. Now, when we look at atoms and molecules, they become the basic part of, essentially looking at forming, let's say, fundamentals of or building blocks of life. Now, what are cells? Now, when we have a cell, and the cell will have a couple of things. So when we go into this particular diagram that we looked at, this particular diagram is a cell because it has a number of atoms and number of molecules and a number of different molecules taking up different functions in that particular cell. So when we discussed, these in particular, we were looking at essentially talking about things like mitochondria, lysosomes, Golgi bodies, centrioles, RNA or DNA, and they were essentially looking at carrying out individual functions within the cell. And this would be termed as a cellular structure. So when we talk about cells in particular, an example of cell will be amoeba, which is the basic form of life. We talk about, jellyfish. Jellyfish, has only one kind of cell, or, it is an organism which has no other types of body systems. So it is basically, one side of a cell. And in this case, cell becomes the basic building block of life because atoms and molecules fuse together to form molecules. And these molecules then are able to support various types of functions, and they can carry out these functions independently. And this leads to the creation of what is called a cell. Now, after the cell, we have what is called tissues. And when we look at tissues, what are tissues? Tissues are basically nothing but a group of cells which are working together to perform a certain function. So when we talk about tissues, they are a group of similar cells. That is the key word. They are similar type of cells that can work together to perform a specific function. And these could be, when I talk about tissues, we talk about muscle tissue, we talk about nervous tissue, we talk about connective tissue. So when we talk about tissues, if you look at your eye, there are lots of tissues which are supporting the eye. Now, eye is made up of retina, the eyeball, and it has, cornea muscles, it has a cornea, things like that. But when we talk about tissue, these are the muscles which are supporting the cornea and the, retina of your, eye, essentially. So when we talk about your hands, all the muscles in your hand is a form of a tissue. And these tissues which are supporting and working together to make those movements possible will be termed as a group of similar cells which are able to perform a specific function. And that is why it forms a tissue. Now, if I move from tissue, we need to go to organs, because a number of tissues or different types of tissues, the right word would be different types of tissues which can work together to perform a specific function would make an organ. So when we talk about organs, what would be the example of organs? Organs would be your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your liver, your pancreas, your kidneys, your looking at other side of organs, your stomach, your windpipe, your mouth. These are organs because they are a group of different types of tissues which come together, which work together to carry out a specific function. What is the function of the heart? It pumps blood. What is the function of the lungs? It purifies the blood in the alveoli or the air sacs which are there in the lungs. What is the function of kidneys? It excretes out or purifies the blood and excretes out the harmful excretions or chemicals from the body. So it basically leads to urination and cleans the body. So when we talk about these organs, they are made up of a group of tissues which are basically performing a similar function. Then we go to organ systems, a number of organs which come together and they form a system: cardiovascular system, endocrine system. You look at respiratory system, digestive system. A number of organs or a group of organs will work together to perform a complex function. And that is why it will be called a organ system. So what does digestive system do? Digestive system has 10 different organs, and these organs, looking at, your stomach, your spleen, your liver, your kidney, your pancreas, your mouth, your tongue, which is a saliva, small intestine, large intestine, and the urethra are all a part of your digestive system. They each perform a specific role, and this specific role leads to the digestion of food that you eat from your mouth. The food is broken down. So each organ does some function. Mouth, for example, makes the food mucus-like. It basically puts or mixes it with saliva, makes it chewable. It goes down to your food pipe. Food pipe works through peristalsis, which is contraction and expansion, and that basically, what is called, basically compresses the food. Then it goes into your stomach. Lots of different organs, secrete different juices. Stomach secretes, gastric juices. Liver secretes bile, pancreatic juice. These all juices then, help the food to dissolve, or, the stomach by regular contractions pounds them, these mucus filled, food or slippery food, which is filled with saliva. It pounds it in the stomach to break it down into smaller nutrients. Then it passes through the stomach into small intestine, where it gets absorbed as nutrients into the bloodstream. And that is the process of, an organ system. So the complex part of the process is that if I eat an ice cream at the end of or if I eat, say, for example, a vegetable, or if I eat egg or chicken or whatever, at the end of it, this gets absorbed in the body. The waste part of it gets excreted from the body. But the digestive system is the one which is a group of organs as a complex system performing a particular function, which is to digest this food into the body, which is to absorb energy and its nutrients, water, important parts which are required to generate and keep the body working. And the waste part of it is thrown out of the system. And this would be an organ system. Now, when you have an organ system, a number of organ systems, then you would look at as some sort of an organism. That means they have the ability to be able to work, or they have the ability to be complete in a sense that they can live independently or do things independently. And this is where an organism will be formed. That means it will be made up of cells, tissues, organs, organ systems, and they would be working together to keep that body or that particular part or as an organism moving. And this would be the highest level of organization that we would see, wherein organ systems work in unison to produce an output which then allows the organism to sustain itself. That means to live on its own. And this means that you are looking at organ systems developing into what is called organization, or in this case, organism. And a number of organisms, for example, if you look at humans, a number of humans would form population. A number of populations or different types of populations would form communities. Different types of communities in different countries or in different geographies would then form an ecosystem. And the ecosystem essentially would be like, if I have, sometimes you say that, okay, are you from India, or are you from Ghana, or are you from Nigeria, or are you from, say, UK, or are you from France? Basically, what you're referring to is a group of population. That where are you from? And are you, we are all the same species, but obviously there are differences in terms of color, tone of skin, culture, background, where we come from. And that is where we talk about community. So where are you from? Which particular location do you come from? And that would mean communities. And when we talk about ecosystems, we would look at ecosystems being not just you, but you in existence with some of the others, which could be plants, animals, other organisms living in the area or living in a particular part of geography. And that would mean that would form an ecosystem. So things like earth, sun, water, providing essential bits to be able to create those building blocks. And then a number of different types of organisms living together under one particular area or a geography would form, say, some sort of an ecosystem. So we talk about tropical ecosystems. We talk about arid desert ecosystems. We talk about, cities as ecosystem, and that would mean that, there are certain types of conditions which are prevalent, and organisms are able to survive and, work together, and not just humans, but in this case, plants, animals, and other living forms, all living together, and would then form what is called the ecosystem. Now, this particular pyramid actually explains, how the major levels of organization actually get formed. So you start with, atoms, chemical reactions from sunlight, UV light, things like that, create what are called chemical reactions. That leads to the creation of what are called molecules. Molecules then form the fundamental building blocks for creation of life at the cellular level. So molecules would be DNA, proteins, carbohydrates, and amino acids, and they lead to the creation of life. At the cellular level, these molecules get organized to perform a function. And when they are able to perform a specific type of function, then they are called cell. Then we look at tissue, we look at organ systems, and a full organism which is able to work in, all these organ systems are able to work harmoniously and work independently to be able to perform and help the organism live independently or work together. And that is where you would say that this is an organism. And that is what you need to be able to explain in the first assessment criteria. Is that okay? Now, I put one odd slide, for each of these to explain very clearly so that you are able to understand these with examples. And that is where cells, then looking at example of tissue, organ systems, and that is where the level of organ systems combine to form an organism. Is that okay? Any questions on this so far?
Are we still going to answer it in a pyramid form or
Yes.
in an essay form? This pyramid, are we going to draw it and answer it like this?
Yeah, you can use the same picture and put it in the document. There are various other pictures that you can take, but this is showing, we start from the smallest atom and then go to an organism level. And you can use this pyramid or maybe a similar picture to explain and write and cover this criteria. You can use this also from the presentation, not a problem. Just make sure that you're referencing it. So referencing part of it is, important, so that you can start with this pyramid and then explain each of them like I've done in the slides, on a Word document, and that would help you cover the, this particular task.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So when we talk about organs and organ systems, couple of examples given, and then we look at organ systems in particular. So example of digestive system given here, not just an animal, but maybe I've taken an example of, a mice. And in that, obviously shown how cells become tissue becomes organ, then organ systems, and then a full organism. Now, the second part of the assessment criteria in this particular unit is to talk about and describe major organ systems in the body. So when we talk about major organ systems, we have studied them in a bit more detail, but here I've listed out in 2 slides all the different types of organ systems which are there in a human body. So if I, kind of highlight this and make it a bit bigger, we talk about, integumentary system, which is basically the skin, nails, and the hair. If you're able to see this, we have the skeleton system, which is bones, cartilage, and joints, especially because it is important. It supports the full, structure of our body. Then you have the muscular system. We have talked about nervous system. We've talked about endocrine and cardiovascular system. These are, 6 types, which I've explained by just basically taking an example of a picture here. And then you can choose, because it says describe examples of major organ systems. So we need to be able to choose the 6 and then write a paragraph each of about 75 to 100 words to explain these systems. So you have the lymphatic system, which helps us sweat, the hormones part of it, and, basically its lymphatic system works, the cardiovascular system, and it is a defensive system in particular in your body. Then you have respiratory, digestive, urinary, reproductive systems, which are there. And that is also an example of human major body systems in the human body. Now, the reason I put these across is because we've studied 6 in particular or 7 in particular, but some of the others we want to be aware of. So integumentary system, skeleton, muscular systems are new that we didn't cover in the 6 systems. And then we have lymphatic system that we haven't covered, and the reproductive system we haven't covered. Now, in the assignment and in the unit, it does not say that you cover all the systems. I think in all, there are a total of 14 organ systems in the human body, if we look at them individually. And we have covered 7. So in this assessment criteria, what you're expected to do is primarily look at covering, the different systems, and using a diagram, you would need to explain at least a few to be able to cover this assessment criteria. So here the idea of the task is, it says describe examples of major organ systems in the body. So you might take digestive system, respiratory system, cardiovascular system, and explain them by use of a picture, and explain the different organs which are there in 2 or 3 lines, and how the organ system actually works. That would be good enough to complete this assessment criteria. Is that okay? Now,
Yes.
Okay, the third assessment, 1.3 assessment criteria talks about explaining the relationship between the structure, and the function within the organ system. So here is what we need to basically explain, is that what is the relationship between the, the organ system, and how does it help support, the human body. So what you will need to do here would be, using some of the organ systems that we've studied, take up an example and explain that in a bit more detail. So what I have done is, the assessment criteria is basically asking you to understand how atom, molecule, cell, tissue, or organ systems become an organism. So here what we have to do is go up to the organ systems from atom, molecule, tissue, cell, tissue, and then organ and organ systems. We have to go up till organ systems and use an example to explain how these organ systems are helping in the function of the human body. So an example that I've taken here is, for example, respiratory system. What I would need to do is explain the respiratory system in terms of what organs it is made up of. So it's made up of lungs, bronchia, trachea, and then there are other structures in the lung which facilitate the exchange of oxygen and the carbon dioxide, which is the alveoli in particular, the air sacs as we call them. And these tiny air sacs essentially help in the exchange of gases in the lungs, which means carbon dioxide, when we exhale out, goes out, and when we breathe in, oxygen goes into the air sacs. That is where it facilitates the exchange at the molecular level, and the oxygen is then carried by the blood cells into heart, and from there it is pumped to the body. So when we talk about the relationship between the structure and the function of an organ system, it is a fundamental concept in biology. That means the structure of the organ or the organ system is very intricately related to its function. That means a structure of the organ defines what kind of function it will do. It then works in coordination with other organs in the body of that system to be able to help perform a particular complex function. So when we talk about respiratory system, we are talking about different sets of organs. When we talk about lungs, trachea, your windpipe, your nostrils, your nose, these are other organs which are all involved in the respiratory system. Now, what is it that they are helping to do? They are working in coordination to basically help exchange the gases. That means oxygen and carbon dioxide, and the purification of blood, which tends to happen when the exchange of these gases happen within the lungs. And their coordinated functioning essentially allows us to perform this complex function of, what is the complex function? This complex function of breathing. So when we talk about respiratory system, we are talking about the complex function of breathing. When I talk about digestive system, what is the complex function of digestive system? The digestive system is helping us to digest food and absorb the useful nutrients into our bloodstream. Things like proteins, carbohydrates, fats, basic ingredients which make up matter are being absorbed into the bloodstream for the purposes of producing energy and sustaining the body functions by storing this energy as fat. And that is the key function of the digestive system. Now, there are specialized organs within organ systems as well. And these organs, when they work together, each organ performs a specialist function, because I cannot say lungs can be replaced by just breathing from the nose, or the stomach in the digestive system can be replaced by, if you don't have a stomach, your digestive system will not work. If you don't have liver, the digestive system will not work. So each of these organs are not replaceable or irreplaceable, and they contribute heavily to the overall functioning of the organ system. So when I talk about digestive system, for example, the digestive system cannot work if any of these organs get, removed. Although this is literally true, but if I look at it in a bit more detail, sometimes you see your spleen can be removed, your gallbladder can be removed, but your body still produces and, can actually sustain, and you can still live if some of these organs are removed because of surgery. Gallbladder stores, your bile juice, which is produced from liver. So if the gallbladder is removed, that means your liver will continue to produce bile. It will overwork, but that does not mean that you will have a situation where you're dying, or, you have a situation wherein it is being fatal towards your life. So sometimes you would see that some of these organ systems which work in tandem with another organ are replaced because they become infected, or they have a cancerous growth, or in some cases they become, non-functional, then they can be removed. But there are very, very few of them in the human body which basically can be removed and still the body can continue to function. So I would not classify this, but generally speaking, in this context, when we look at organs in the organ systems, they have a specialized function. And without these organs, they're performing their specialized function, the organ systems cannot work. And then when we talk about one of the complex things, which is relationship, why do we use the word relationship? Because they have an interdependence on each other. When I mean interdependence, what I mean is that each of these organs within a particular organ system have a specific function, and they depend on each other to be able to perform that function. Now, if the liver stops producing bile juice, or if the stomach stops producing, gastric juices, then you would not have a proper digestion in your body. It could have other severe consequences like constipation, but in some serious cases, this could mean that you would require surgery, because maybe there is some sort of a fault or some sort of a problem issue which has occurred, and that is not helping the organs actually perform this function. So if you have organs and you have organs working together in unison, then that means that they have interdependence. And in that, when I say interdependence, what it means by that is that one organ system is often dependent on the other for its function. And if I look at giving another example, what you would normally see is, if I talk about circulatory system, it depends on the respiratory system. Now, why do I say this? And what we need to establish as a relationship between the two is that, can the respiratory system function in isolation of the circulatory system? Probably not. And you wouldn't be able to survive. The reason is, the circulatory system is circulating blood, purified and carrying oxygen, which goes to all parts of the body when pumped by the heart. But where does the exchange of this gas happen? That means, waste gases like carbon dioxide are excreted out. And when we breathe, so if I'm breathing, oxygen or air from my nostrils is going into the lungs, and that is where the splitting of the molecules is happening, wherein oxygen is being absorbed by the blood and the carbon dioxide is being exhaled out from my mouth or my nostrils. And that is where it means that there's a closer relationship and interdependence between different organ systems as well. So respiratory system helps breathing, but the breathing part of it, the function part of it, is basically helping purify blood in the body, or helping the red blood cells of the circulatory system carry oxygen to all parts and organs of the body. And that is where the interdependence or relationship is between the two systems, because the circulatory system depends on the respiratory system for oxygenation of blood. The digestive system, I can say, depends on the muscular system for the physical process of digestion. So if peristalsis, which is the concept wherein it's contracting and expansion of the muscle tissue happens, and that pushes the food down from your mouth to your throat, from your throat to your esophagus, from esophagus into your stomach. And if peristalsis, which is a muscular part, or a process which is a part of the muscular system, does not happen, then you would essentially choke. You would not be able to swallow food. And in those cases, we will need to say that both these systems, the muscular system and the digestive system, are dependent on each other. And they are dependent because that allows the food to be, when we eat the food, it allows the food to be able to go down into the stomach for the processes of starting the digestion. So when we talk about organ, or when we talk about organ systems, they are very intricately designed to perform a specific function, and each of the function of each of these organs and organ systems is dependent on the structure and on some of the other systems. And this relationship is essentially fundamental to understanding how the organisms or the human body works. Is that understood? And that is what you need to understand and explain in this particular assessment criteria 1.3. Is that okay? Any questions on this assessment criteria? How to explain the relationship between organ and organ systems, and the interdependent or relationship between different organ systems is what we need to be able to explain with an example in this particular assessment criteria. So you can take respiratory and circulatory system, you can take digestive and muscular system, and they would then help you explain the relationship between the structure and the functions of the different organ systems. Is that okay? Any questions? Okay, now let's go to the last assessment criteria, which talks about explain how organ systems work together to maintain a normal body functioning. Now here, what we need to be able to do is use one of the handouts that I have provided for the 7 different organ systems that we have studied, to use it to explain how the normal, functioning of that organ system helps in the functioning of the human body. So when I talk about this, there is a handout which specifically I put on Moodle, and I will show that to you. That handout would, if you read, you have to basically look at, using one of them as an example, and then put it in your own words to cover this particular task. So if I go into the Moodle, so it is very closely related to this assessment criteria 1.3, because we explained what is the relationship between organ and different organ systems. Here it is asking you to explain the working or functioning of the organ system. That is what you need to pay a bit of focus on. So here, when we talk about the assessment criteria, we will need to look at how the two organ systems depend on each other, and a brief explanation of how these systems come together to work and help the human body function is what you need to, essentially explain. So if I have to do this particular task in terms of, showing you on Moodle, let me just switch over. So if you go on to Moodle on this side, and if I look at one of the handouts that are provided, which is basically talking about the various types of, organ systems, the handouts which are provided. So what I would want to be able to do in this case is summarize basically, the different systems that we have studied, and then wrap it around to show how this helps in the functioning of the human body. So let me do this and open one of the handouts. So if I open, say, respiratory system, and I go into, the details of this particular system in terms of the organs which it contains and how these organs, all work together to be able to help in the process of breathing. So what we want to be able to do in this assessment criteria is explain how the organ systems work together to help in the functioning of that particular system. So the focus is to, if I read the task again, the focus is on functioning of the organ system. So it says, explain how organ systems work together to maintain normal body functioning. So the idea in this assessment criteria is to explain the functioning of that organ system. So you have to take one example. You could take any of the organ systems that we've discussed and focus on the function part of it to cover this particular criteria. So when we talk about, say, respiratory system, what is the function of respiratory system? The function of respiratory system is breathing. It is external respiration, internal respiration, cellular respiration, regulation of blood pH level. These are the functions of the respiratory system. Now, if I say cellular respiration, that means if you look at all the cells in the human body working together, at some stage, an example here is when you do running or if you do brisk walking, that means you're walking fast, you normally feel that after, if you haven't done walking regularly and you suddenly start walking quite fast, and then when you break and take a break, you would generally see your shins and your legs actually paining. You feel a bit of a pain in your legs. The reason why you feel that pain is because a lot of amino acids or acids, which are basically, the byproduct of when muscular tissue is being exercised, you would see that the muscular tissue actually, needs a lot of oxygen to be able to function effectively. And because when you walk fast or you start running and you do this quite often, you would see that the muscles get fatigued. And the muscle fatigue, which is caused, essentially causes the, the exchange of oxygen, which is required, or the requirement of burning of fat to create energy, which releases carbon dioxide or other waste products, gets accumulated in your legs. And that is what essentially gives you that, pain or feeling of lethargy, or, your legs feeling heavy. Now, if your body is functioning well, it means because cells are producing energy, they are respirating. That means they're burning fat to release energy. And that energy which is being released is creating carbon dioxide. Now, if the blood flow is maintained and, obviously the blood is carrying oxygen, then the exchange of gases is happening at the cellular level. And that would be termed as cellular respiration. And when we talk about, internal respiration, you're looking at internal organs producing lots of energy, releasing a lot of energy, and that would help your body function, or, your legs to move and run, and obviously, help you in brisk walking. That part would be internal respiration. External is you see sweat on your skin. You start sweating, you underarms, you start sweating on the forehead. And this is because your body is burning fat. And in order to keep the temperature of your skin at a certain level, your body is excreting water, which is with salts, and that is helping in the regulation of temperature of your body, and that would be termed as external respiration. And obviously, all this is being helped by breathing that you're doing. And this breathing that you're doing is basically, helping you take in oxygen. Your red blood cells are carrying oxygen to all the parts of the body at the cellular tissue level. And that is where the exchange of these gases is happening in order to take away the waste gases, which is carbon dioxide, and oxygen being utilized to produce energy in those cells. So here, any particular handout that you look at of whatever system, you would need to explain the functioning of the organ system. And that explanation of the functioning of the organ system would essentially cover the assessment criteria, 1.4. Is that okay? Any questions on this?
How many are we going to answer? Is it that like respiratory system, we just talk about the functions and all, or
you can take one in particular because it says explain. It does not have explain how many, or it does not say many. So you can take any one of the systems. So digestive or circulatory, respiratory, you'll have to use maybe two systems in some cases to be able to explain the function, because you might take up digestive system, but you will not be able to show how the interfunctioning or interdependence is happening on the other system. So digestive or circulatory, respiratory or circulatory, you might need to look at nervous or muscular, endocrine or lymphatic system, for example, your skin integumentary or lymphatic system, to show how immune is your immune is working in the body, urinary or circulatory system. And these are any type of these two systems would be required to talk about the functioning and how they are helping the normal body to, a normal body, when I say human body, to function. Is that okay? The focus is on functioning of the systems to be able to help the human body do its normal functions. That is what is required to be covered in this criteria. Is that okay? So two systems which are showing some sort of interdependence on each other will allow you to discuss the function, and those detailing of the function to a certain extent would allow you to show how these two systems are interdependent on each other, and then help the human body function in a normal manner, or help in the normal body functioning. Okay, so these are the ways that you can actually explain this criteria. I can't do digestive and respiratory system because digestive and respiratory system might not be related. Digestive system does not require exchange of oxygen or purification of blood, or oxygen is required by, say, for example, or breathing is required by any of the organs which is helping in digestion of food. So that is why they are non-related. But digestive and muscular system could work, because when we look at peristalsis, the pushing in of food from the mouth mixed with saliva down the food tube or esophagus into your stomach, and then onwards to intestine, large intestine, and then finally in your urethra and excretion through anus, would require muscular system to also work in tandem with the digestive system. So you'll have to apply some logic and then use the two systems to be able to explain the normal body functioning. Is that okay? Good stuff. So if you think of any questions, please note them down. We can discuss them tomorrow before we start learning outcome 2. Tomorrow's session, we are going to do early as well. So we're going to start at 10 o'clock. Or earlier, if I can do a bit earlier, that will be better, so that will allow us to keep the rest of the day free, and you can also plan things at your end. So just very briefly looking at what would suit, for tomorrow's discussion what time would suit for tomorrow's discussion? Any ideas, any thoughts? What could be the time for discussion tomorrow? Would 9 o'clock suit us? 9:30?
Okay, now, no, from 1, please.
Anybody else?
In the morning, you'll stay on 4 o'clock. I can't be available by 1.
So my suggestion is we want to get it done in the morning, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock maximum. So the idea is we can have the rest of the day free. So are you guys able to attend, say 10 o'clock tomorrow?
No, 9 will be okay, please. So.
What about Bill, Rosemary, Martina?
What time tomorrow, please?
Well, I am looking at doing earliest possible, 9:30.
Yeah, that's okay. If the rest are okay,
okay,
with 9 o'clock.
Okay, 9:30 is okay by me.
Yeah.
But keeping in mind, the days are longer now. So what we want to do is either do them early in the morning or do late in the evening so that you can plan the rest of the day, and do other things with family or, maybe otherwise. So what I'll do is I'll send out the code just after the session for 9:30 tomorrow morning, 9:30 tomorrow morning, and then we'll finish learning outcome 2, hopefully, and discuss it out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining today. Thank you.
Better,
please. Yeah, Roman.
Instead of 9:30.
Sorry?
9 would be better instead of 9:30. So
okay, that's fine. That's fine. I can start 9 o'clock, no problem. I'll send the code out for 9.
Excuse me, Roman.
Thank you.
No worries. I'll speak to you in a minute, Salil. No worries.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.